Hi, good evening. My name is Callie Gardner, and I am speaking on the Fat Cats Arcade, both the company and also the individual arcade in Gilbert, Arizona. So, introduction to the organization. Fat Cats All Out Fun began in 1999 as just an idea on the back of a napkin, which, if you are a Harry Potter fan like me, you also know that's how Harry Potter was made as well. Dave Rudder and Sean Collins, two friends who wanted to create the ultimate family experience of entertainment. The first location opened up in a suburb outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, in August of 2001. They began expansion in 2007, opening up different locations in Utah and then expanding out in 2010 into Colorado and Idaho. The location in Gilbert, Arizona opened up in 2015, which introduced a new concept within the concept of entertainment, including a movie theater, reclining chairs in that movie theater within the entertainment building. So, diversity and inclusion component. Fat Cat challenges the status quo of modern entertainment by combining different areas of entertainment all in one place. The component alone makes accessibility easier for families with an arcade, restaurant, movie theater, bowling alley, mini golf, and a bar all in one place allows for fun for all ages, no discrimination. This business allows everyone to find something they can do in terms of entertainment in one building. The picture down below is one of the newer Fat Cats locations in terms of when it opened. This is the Mesa location. I have actually been to both the Gilbert and the Mesa location. And I can say the Mesa one is a little bit nicer because it is newer. But they both have the reclining chairs in the movie theater with accessibility seating, as well as a full arcade. One of them, I believe, is a little bit larger than the other. The Mesa location is just a general, like, larger building and altogether. They both have a restaurant where they serve Italian food, and then quick American eats as well, like cheeseburgers, hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken tenders, and then they also have movie theater food as well as nachos, popcorn, the easy concessions that you would get. And then they also have bowling alleys in both, mini golf in both, and I believe the Mesa location also has laser tag. So processes to make change. Fat Cat's development, clearly, as you saw in the introduction, went through a lot of different innovations with different openings and many different changes within their in what their entertainment mission was. They didn't start with a movie theater. They didn't start with seven different things in one entertainment center. They wanted a more centralized thing for more places. So instead of you having to go to the bowling alley and go to bowl, and then you go to an arcade, and then you go to a movie theater, it's all centralized, which actually makes things more accessible for families who might have larger families. It makes it easier instead of having to travel to different places as well. It's also probably more cost efficient as well. What started as a basic model of bowling in an arcade in partnership with Benton Enterprises, this has been over a decade-long partnership that they have had thus far. Fat Cats was able to provide a consistent experience in arcade gaming to each location. They started with Fat Cats in Bluffdale. Benton Enterprises deals with any repairs, design, and installation for Fat Cats, kind of leaving Fat Cats corporate or Fat Cats management out of it altogether. They contract it out to Benton Enterprises, and then they're able to come in and deal with any repairs and make changes in design and installation. But I'm confident that if I were to contact Fat Cats, they can get in contact with the right people and make some changes if there were some things that I didn't see. Um, it is evident that a lot of work goes into just placement of arcade games, as that is their main, I think it's one of their main cost revenue like generations. I don't have the exact statistic in here, but I believe it's around 30%. And if you have eight different things, 30% is a significant amount of revenue. But the work that goes into that from both an accessibility and a revenue perspective, when you walk in, you're not bombarded by arcade games right in front of you. You have options of arcade games most of the time on either side. In the Mesa location, it's along walls, and then on one side, the Gilbert location, you walk in and there's two separate sides. And then what separates one of the arcade sides is some dining seating. It's not fancy dining by any means. There's also an alcoholic bar, an ice cream shop inside of the Gilbert location. Um, but you can tell that there's work put into it and that someone's not just coming in and haphazardly placing arcade games. And it's definitely more accessible in the fact that there's more space to move around. Um, if you think about like a traditional arcade, there's not much space other than where you stand to play Pac-Man. So some challenges faced. There was not any in-depth articles in terms of any challenges that Fat Cats has faced, but the challenges that they face are according to their patrons. Um, some people would say that the bowling alleys would experience many malfunctions, accessibility factors of the bowling alley, such as the lanes that help support people that need a little bit of extra help in the bowling alley, would come up and go down without indication that that should happen. There was lack of bowling balls, if they didn't have enough sizes. I find one of the problems that I have when I go is the size of bowling ball that I need does not have big enough finger holes for me to be able to use the size that I want or need. Um, Additionally, this kind of goes against what I just said, but spaces can feel tight and limited in movement. This is dependent upon um, obviously patron movement, how busy they are, if they have a special event, if there's a new movie releasing. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And I could see where there were some spaces in the arcade in which there were limited spaces, such as putting high top tables in the very few like spaces between games um, was not probably the best option, other than to keep kids from going behind the games is a good idea. Um, Other patrons talked about long waits, and hard to get assistance. I did notice that while when I went, they were not busy at all. There was not a single person in line. There was nobody getting food. There wasn't even a line to check tickets at the movie theater. The bowling alley only had like two families in the lanes, so it was just generally not busy. But I knew it was going to be hard to get assistance. There was at first two employees that were behind the counter. And then I kind of was just walking around and serving, doing my checklist. And then there was a large group of employees that were all huddled in a very small corner in the concessions area. And there was nobody anywhere else. There was nobody in the arcades. There was nobody behind the ticketing counter. There was nobody like helping anybody on the other side of the arcade, which is a little bit more detached. There was also nobody at the price counter, and there were people playing games. So I would be frustrated if I was a patron coming in and I had to wait for somebody to come help me at the price counter when the arcade was clearly the busiest part of the center. Um, Other things are pricing. I will say I have been going to Fat Cats since 2015 when it opened, and I was a kid, so I didn't really have anything to compare it to. But I do know that pre-COVID, we were able to afford a lot more things, and now we're a little bit more conservative, just as a country and in general. Um, but even though we might be more conservative with our money, that doesn't mean that pricing doesn't increase as well. I do know for a fact that Fat Cats pricing has increased over time, just speaking to my dad, who is a member of Fat Cats, as like a family member package where they get to go in, they get drinks, they get special reduced pricing to support families that do go as often as my dad does. He lives less than a mile away from that location. Additionally, customer service. So this was not one that was included in any of the Google reviews that they kind of said that the customer service was pretty subpar. There wasn't anything bad to say about it. The only thing that I would have to say about it is I was faced with the challenge of I called the arcade just to get verbal permission to make sure it was okay for me to kind of be walking around and looking at things and taking pictures, which legally I am allowed to do, but I wanted to ask as a courtesy. Um, and I was met with somebody over the phone who I knew was a manager, but she reacted very negatively and immediately thought that I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing and was just like, nope, you can't do that. And so I started to kind of explain further. I was like, so this is the assignment. I'm actually going through and checking for ADA compliance, diversity and inclusion compliance. I'm not talking to any patrons. It's just myself. I'm writing things down, or I was actually taking notes in my AirPods and then writing them down later. And she was still really standoffish, and she was not for, I guess if I was the customer, not for the customer in that moment. She basically shut me down and said that it was a release night for a new movie, so they weren't going to be able to help me at all. And so I asked, I was like, is there any way that I could speak to a like general manager so I could just ask a couple of questions in terms of what I would be allowed to do, because I'm not doing anything that it interferes with the environment. And then I spoke directly to a manager and she was like, "Oh, absolutely, not a problem. You can totally do that." I think my only frustration was I was a little bit annoyed when I went in and they weren't busy at all because it seemed like they were just trying to shoo me off the phone. And that's not a good look, especially if I was explaining what I was doing as a student in the community, in a local community who was wanting to take a look at what this company is doing for disability and inclusion. And so to be standoffish like that kind of paints a negative picture before I even get there. Some outcomes. So it seems that many of the challenges that I talked about and listed are more of a general overview. They can't really speak for each individual location. That would take hours because they do have lots and lots of locations with all different experiences. What Fat Cats Gilbert has done specifically, excuse me, to eliminate some of the challenges are the family membership packages that I mentioned earlier. They're for families that come regularly for concessions and games at a reduced price. It's on a tiered program. I think there's like green, blue, and black or something like that. Um, and they're tiered based on how often you want to be there. You can get a bowling package, you can get an arcade package, you can get a movie ticket and concessions package. So it's you can kind of play with it a little bit to help reduce that price. They also, I know this for a fact because I was there in 2015. They moved games in 2015 that I would have deemed as hazardous in the walkways. It was very on top of you when you would go back when the location first opened. So it does seem that they've made some changes in terms of in making sure that they have more open spaces and not making patrons feel like they're in a sardine can, which is a quote that I saw in one of the Yelp reviews. And also maintaining their bowling lanes with multiple attendants. The bowling alley is in the farthest part of the arcade, and I did see that there were 2 to 3 attendants that were back there. And I personally have not ran into any issues in terms of bowling in the 11 years that I have been going to Fat Cats. So some connections to materials. The first thing I put in there was the quote in terms of universal design for customers. I know that diversity in the workplace is one thing, but diversity for your general public and for your customers is also so, so important. Because you're the first thing that they see when they walk in, and you are supposed to be creating that inclusion for your patrons. So applying universal design principles to customer service includes provision of effective communication, accessible facilities, and individualized assistance and usable products for everyone. Universal design does not only allow business or agency to better meet the needs of customers with disabilities, but enhances quality service and products for everyone, such as self-service kiosks, having attendants available, and also having games that are accessible to more than just people who are able-bodied and walking. It's not fair to have only those games, and they did for sure have some games in which they had wheelchair accessibility or bench seating where you could transfer onto bench seating to play a game. But there wasn't a ton, I will say that. Um, Other things that I thought about were diversity of experiences and thoughts. Specifically thinking to chapter 2 of our What If book about our vacuum CEO who learned about his wife's experience with a rubber band and fixing the vacuum. Um, what I tie to that is openness to other people's experiences. And I'm connecting this because I was very frustrated in talking to the first person that I did over the phone. It seemed very like, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to know what my store is inclusive with and not inclusive with. So it's just really important to have those experiences and thoughts of other people other than inner circles. Because of course, those in inner circles of fat cats are going to say nothing but good things about fat cats because they are employed by fat cats. Um, Additionally, diversity in the workplace and the importance of a diverse team. In terms of what I saw when I was there, the team seemed to be around the same age, probably all in their early 20s, to late 30s, if that. But other than that, there didn't seem to be any other age differences. It seemed like there was a good mix of men and women. And then also, I didn't see any people of color working at all. It might just be the geographical area, but I was a little bit disappointed to see that. The quote that I included was from one of the articles in our readings in the past couple of weeks. The single most obvious reason to push hard for diversity is that promoting diversity means promoting understanding, and that leads to better products that solve problems for those who might otherwise have been sidelined. I didn't see anybody with disabilities working either, at least visible disabilities. And then the last thing that I have is while statistically only 81 women only 81 women and 73 women of color are promoted for every 100 man promoted to manager. As a result, men significantly outnumber women in managerial positions. I was happy to see, regardless of how I was spoken to, that the manager that I spoke to over the phone and then the manager I was passed off to after that were both women. And being a woman myself in a managerial position in my job, it's empowering to see that we are increasing that number and that it is possible. We just have to be loud about it. Um, because it's going to be impossible to make a sound if you're keeping your mouth shut. Um, and then next, I just have my references. But thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation, and I would love feedback. Thank you so much.